And at that time, back in 2008, the French National Library had already taken wireless out because of health considerations. There were parts in 2008, and there were parts of Italy and Israel and Belgium who were also taking measures to protect the public. So I began to share this information back and forth with our schools. And I went into it thinking that, if we had had a gas leak in our science lab at school, they would have evacuated the building immediately. So I kind of thought that's what would happen when I raised my hand and said, I think we have a problem with wireless. But I got back no response for the longest time. But I kept providing this information, and ultimately my schools did form a subcommittee with our school curriculum director, our technology director, and one of our school committee members. And I think it was actually when they read the legal fine print that comes with all of our devices that they realized they had legal risk exposure. Because if somebody, for example, is listening to us today and they have an iPhone, they could simply go into settings and then scroll down to general. If it's an older phone, then you would hit about at the top there. If it's a newer phone, you just go right from general all the way down to legal and regulatory. On the older phones, you go general, about, and then down to legal. But when you hit that legal or legal and regulatory, you find a short little list, and at the bottom of that, it says radio frequency radiation or RF exposure. And when you read that legal fine print, it tells us right there to keep this device at a distance from the body, or you may exceed the government guidelines for public radiation exposure, right? And it also says to use a hands-free option, because without forthright telling us, these single devices now, like a cell phone, have 5 or 6 separate antennas that continuously pulse what turns out to be microwave radiation. And we don't need that. We're certainly not saying no technology, but there are much, much safer ways to access excellent technology. And in that one device, you now have a cell antenna, a data, a Bluetooth, a Wi-Fi, a locator, and a hotspot. So turn it all off and then just learn to turn on the one that you need at the time that you need it, instead of letting that device sit on your body or right next to you or next to your children in bed. Learn what the technology is and then learn to choose it safely. So I did help my schools here in Ashland, Massachusetts in the United States become the first in the nation to even have this little sign hanging in our classrooms that basically says, turn off the devices when you're not using them, turn the wireless infrastructure on only when needed, and always place the mobile device on a solid surface, because right there in the fine print, it tells us don't put it on your body. And I was recently asked to speak to a group of high school students at a school here in Massachusetts, and they chose in their high school to hardwire the technology. And this is what they did. They put a Wi-Fi on-demand switch in, and only the teachers are allowed to use it. And I thought that switch was pretty clever, because it's got a 10-minute, a 20-minute, a 30-minute, and a 60-minute button. So if you turn it on, it will automatically go off. You can't forget to leave the wireless radiation running. So that was one solution that a school used here. And at the beginning of the day, when the children come in, they just put all their electronics in a cubby and it stays there for the day. And then when they leave at the end, they put it in airplane mode so that it's not transmitting while the kids are in the building. So it's not rocket science, but there's a big gap in knowledge. And so that's what I'm so grateful to be speaking with you and your audience about today, is little tiny things. Right now with the COVID-19 or the coronavirus, my 2 young adult daughters are back home. And so we have run Ethernet cables to their laptops, their cell phones, and we've put our television through an Ethernet cable so they can still get at their favorite programs from Netflix or whatever they're watching. But we're in control, and we get to just go in and turn off all those wireless antennas. And the beauty of it is, I'm sure you know, is that once you decide to hardwire, when I first brought the adapters home for my daughter, I said, okay, plug this in. And she was 15 at the time. And 15-year-olds really just want to be just like their friends. They don't want to be separated from the pack. So she was kind of rolling her eyeballs at me. And I said, here, sweetie, just plug this in. So she did. And this was her cell phone. And then I said, do something. And she went, oh my gosh, it's so much faster. And it's so true. Wireless is crummy technology. It's unreliable. Your data is just out there for anybody to grab through the air. The privacy issues are huge. And so I could see the wheels going in her head. And she said, okay, Mom, so if I've got this plugged in to the adapter, and for her iPhone, all we needed to do was buy this little adapter. It's the Lightning to RJ45 Ethernet adapter. We just bought it on Amazon. And she goes, so if I've turned off all those antennas, we're running everything through a cable, does that mean it's not eating into my data plan anymore? And I said, that's right, because if she goes over budget, we make her pay out of pocket. So that's how I got my teenager on board. And for both my daughters, this is uncomfortable to speak to their friends about because nobody else knows. But I think one of the most effective ways to offer somebody to start this conversation is to show them the fine print in their own device.